The moment I closed my eyes that night, I never expected my life would never be the same again. I was just an ordinary person, living an ordinary life, when something extraordinary happened to me. It was one evening, and I had decided to spend some quiet time alone, away from the noise of the world. I found myself in a small, empty room where I often went to pray and think. The silence wrapped around me like a warm blanket, and I closed my eyes, hoping to find some peace. But what happened next was not peaceful at all. It was urgent, it was a warning, and I knew deep in my heart that I had to share it with every person who would listen. You see, I am a Christian. I believe in God, and I believe He speaks to people like you and me. That night, He spoke to me in a way I had never experienced before. Through pictures in my mind, visions that felt more real than the room I was sitting in. And the message was clear. Time is running out, and we need to get ready. I didn't ask for this experience. I wasn't seeking anything special. I was just a regular person trying to connect with God. But sometimes, God chooses the most ordinary people to share the most important messages, and I believe He chose me that night to tell you what I saw. The vision I'm about to share with you is not just a story, it's a warning, it's an invitation, and it's the most important thing I've ever had to tell anyone. As I sat in that quiet room, something strange began to happen. The darkness behind my closed eyelids started to change. It was as if I was being transported somewhere else entirely. Suddenly, I found myself standing inside what looked like a beautiful chapel. The chapel was small but magnificent. Sunlight streamed through colorful windows, creating rainbows of light that danced on the wooden floors. The air smelled sweet, like flowers in spring. There were wooden benches arranged in rows, and at the front stood a simple wooden cross. Everything about this place felt holy and peaceful, but I wasn't alone. As I looked around, trying to understand where I was and how I got there, I heard a voice. It wasn't coming from any person I could see, but it filled the entire chapel. The voice was gentle but strong, kind but serious. It was the voice of someone who loved me deeply, but had something very important to tell me. The line has been drawn, the voice said. I felt my heart start beating faster. What line? What did that mean? Look, the voice continued, and see what is coming upon the earth. Suddenly, the beautiful chapel began to fade away, like a picture dissolving into water. The colorful light dimmed, and I found myself somewhere completely different. I was standing on what seemed like a hill, looking down at the world below, but the world I saw was not the world I knew. Darkness covered everything. Not the darkness of night, but a heavy, thick darkness that seemed to press down on everything it touched. It was the kind of darkness that made you feel hopeless and afraid. This darkness wasn't just covering the sky, it was covering people's hearts. As I watched from my place on the hill, I began to see cities spread out below me. But these weren't the busy, lively cities I was used to seeing. These cities looked empty and sad, even though there were still people walking around in them. The people in these cities moved like they were sleepwalking. Their faces were blank, as if they had forgotten how to feel joy or hope. They walked past each other, without looking up, without smiling, without caring. It was as if their souls had gone to sleep. The buildings in these cities were tall and impressive, but they felt cold and lifeless. There were shops and offices and restaurants, but even though people went in and out of them, there was no real life there. Everything felt empty, like a beautiful box with nothing inside. Then I saw something that broke my heart. I saw churches, many churches, but most of them were empty. Their doors were locked, their windows were dark, and weeds grew around their foundations. These were churches that had once been full of people who loved God, but now they sat abandoned and forgotten. However, not all the churches were empty. Here and there, scattered like tiny lights in the darkness, I saw small groups of people gathered together. These people looked different from everyone else. Their faces were bright, and their eyes were full of hope. They were singing and praying together, and around them the darkness seemed a little less thick. These were the faithful ones, the people who had refused to let the darkness into their hearts. They were like candles burning in a dark room, small but powerful, pushing back the shadows around them. As I continued to watch, I saw that the whole world was in chaos. Governments were fighting among themselves, unable to agree on anything. The leaders looked confused and angry, making decisions that only made things worse. The places where people bought and sold things were in trouble too. Banks were closing, and people couldn't find work. Families were struggling to buy food and pay for their homes. Fear was everywhere, and nobody seemed to know how to fix the problems. Schools and hospitals were overwhelmed. Teachers didn't know what to teach anymore, and doctors couldn't heal all the sickness, not just sickness of the body, but sickness of the heart and mind. It was as if the whole world had forgotten how to work together, how to love each other, how to hope for better days. But then, in the middle of all this darkness and confusion, I saw something amazing. I saw warriors. These weren't soldiers with guns and armor. These were people who looked ordinary, just like you and me. But they carried something different. They carried light, not flashlights or candles, but a light that came from inside them. This light was so bright that wherever they went, the darkness had to move away. These warriors were God's chosen people, not because they were better than anyone else, but because they had chosen to follow God even when it was hard. They walked through the dark cities, and everywhere they stepped, flowers began to grow. They spoke to the sleepwalking people, and some of those people began to wake up. I watched as these warriors approached a magnificent tree. This tree was unlike any tree I had ever seen. Its trunk was massive and strong. Its branches reached high into the sky, and its leaves were the most beautiful green imaginable. But what made this tree truly special was its fruit. The fruit on this tree glowed with a soft, warm light. As I watched, some of the warriors picked the fruit and ate it. Immediately I could see them become stronger and more radiant. Then they took more fruit and began sharing it with others, with the sick, the sad, the confused, and the hopeless. Everyone who ate this fruit began to change. The sick became well, the sad began to smile, the confused found clarity, the hopeless discovered hope again. This was the tree of life, and its fruit had the power to heal everything that was broken. Near the tree, I saw something else beautiful. There was a great banquet table, longer than any table I had ever seen. It was covered with a white cloth so clean it seemed to glow, and it was set with golden plates and cups. The food on this table looked more delicious than any meal you could imagine. Around this table sat people from all over the world, people of every color, speaking every language, wearing clothes from every culture. But they all had one thing in common. Their faces were full of joy and peace. They were laughing together, sharing stories and celebrating like they were at the best party ever thrown. This was the banquet of heaven, and everyone was invited. But I noticed something sad. There were many empty chairs. So many people had been invited to this feast, but they had chosen not to come. As I continued to watch this incredible vision, I saw a stream of water flowing from somewhere near the great tree. This water was crystal clear and moved with a gentle musical sound. But this wasn't ordinary water. It was living water, the kind that could satisfy every thirst and heal every wound. The stream flowed down through the dark cities, and I watched to see what would happen when people encountered it. This is where I began to understand what the voice had meant when it said, "The line has been drawn." When people came to this stream, they had to make a choice. Some people, when they saw the water, fell to their knees. They cupped the water in their hands and drank it gratefully. These were the humble ones, people who knew they needed help, people who weren't too proud to admit they were thirsty. As soon as they drank the living water, these people were transformed. The darkness that had been weighing them down lifted away like morning mist. Their eyes became bright, their faces became peaceful, and they began to glow with the same light I had seen in the warriors. But other people, when they came to the stream, reacted very differently. They looked at the water and turned their noses up at it. "I don't need this," they seemed to say. "I'm fine on my own." These were the proud ones, people who thought they were too good, too smart, or too strong to need help from anyone, even from God. These proud people walked away from the stream, and as they did, the darkness around them grew thicker. They became more isolated, more angry, more afraid. They couldn't see the light anymore, even when it was right in front of them. This was the invisible line that had been drawn through humanity. It wasn't a line you could see with your eyes, but it was more real than any line drawn on paper. On one side were the humble people who chose to drink from the stream of life. On the other side were the proud people who chose to rely only on themselves. The line wasn't drawn by God to keep people apart. God wanted everyone to come to the stream and drink. The line was drawn by people's own choices, their choice to be humble or proud, their choice to accept help or refuse it, their choice to follow the light or walk in darkness. As my vision continued, I found myself being lifted higher, as if I were climbing an invisible mountain. From this new height, I could see even more of what was happening in the world below. I saw that in the middle of all the chaos and darkness, there was an island. This island was different from everything around it. While the rest of the world was covered in thick darkness, this island was surrounded by soft, gentle light. On this island, I saw people gathered together in prayer. They weren't just praying for themselves, they were praying for the whole world. They were praying for the sleepwalking people in the cities, for the confused leaders, for the sick and the sad and the lost. Their prayers rose up like sweet incense, creating a protective shield around the island. This was the island of prayer, a safe place in the middle of the storm. Anyone could come to this island, but they had to want to come. They had to choose prayer over worry, hope over fear, love over hate. Then, as I watched from my mountaintop, I saw something that took my breath away. In the distance, beyond all the darkness and chaos, a new city was beginning to appear. This city was nothing like the empty, sad cities I had seen before. This city sparkled like it was made of jewels and precious metals. Its walls were strong and beautiful, and its gates were always open, welcoming anyone who wanted to enter. The streets of this city were made of gold so pure it was transparent like glass. There was a river running through the middle of the city, and along its banks grew trees that bore fruit every month. Fruit that could heal any sickness and satisfy any hunger. But the most amazing thing about this city was that there was no darkness there at all. The whole city was filled with light, not the harsh light of electric bulbs, but the warm, gentle light of perfect love. In this light, everyone could see clearly, and everyone was beautiful. This was the New Jerusalem, the city that God was preparing for all those who chose to follow him. It was a place where there would be no more crying, no more pain, no more fear, no more death. It was home, the home that every human heart has been searching for. As my vision began to fade, I heard the voice speak to me one more time, but now the voice seemed to be speaking directly to my heart, with an urgency I had never heard before. Choose now, the voice said, before the light returns. I understood what this meant. The darkness I had seen covering the earth wasn't permanent. There was coming a day when Jesus, the light of the world, would return and chase away all the darkness forever. But when that day came, it would be too late to change your mind about which side of the line you wanted to be on. The choice had to be made now, while there was still time. The choice between humility and pride. The choice between drinking from the stream of life or walking away thirsty. The choice between joining the warriors of light or remaining asleep in the darkness. When the vision ended, I found myself back in that quiet room where I had started. But I was not the same person who had sat down to pray that evening. I had seen things that changed everything I thought I knew about the world and about what really matters. For days after that vision, I tried to go back to my normal life. I tried to pretend that what I had seen wasn't real, that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But I couldn't do it. The images were too clear, the message too urgent, the love I had felt too real. I realized that I could no longer be silent. I had been given this vision not just for myself, but to share with others. God had shown me these things because he loves every single person on this earth, and he wants everyone to know that time is running out. If you're reading this story, it's not an accident. You're reading it because God wants you to know that you have a choice to make. The line has been drawn, and you're standing right at it. You can choose to humble yourself and drink from the stream of living water, or you can walk away in pride. You can choose to join the warriors of light who are healing the world with God's love, or you can remain asleep in a world that's falling apart. You can choose to come to the island of prayer and help intercede for others, or you can try to handle life's storms on your own. You can choose to prepare for the New Jerusalem, where you'll find the home your heart has always been looking for, or you can settle for the empty cities that will never satisfy your soul. The choice is yours, and it's the most important choice you'll ever make. But remember, you have to choose now, while there's still time. I've told you what I saw because I care about you, even though I may never meet you in person. I care because God cares, and He doesn't want anyone to miss out on the incredible life He has planned for those who love Him. So what will you choose? Will you drink from the stream? Will you join the warriors? Will you come to the island of prayer? Will you prepare for the New Jerusalem? The invitation is open, the water is free, the light is waiting. All you have to do is choose. And if this story has touched your heart, if you felt something stirring inside you as you read these words, then please don't keep it to yourself. Share this story with others. Comment below and tell me what you think about this testimony.